When I sold CottageLink Rental Management in 2022, we were running at 85% direct bookings. That didn't happen by accident. We'd been at it for 20 years, booking direct long before Airbnb was even a concept. For most property managers, though, direct booking remains one of the hardest things to build. Guests arrive through the OTAs, they stay, they leave, and you're left with almost nothing you can use to bring them back. That's the gap today's sponsor, Stayfi, is designed to close. And I'll be telling you more about them later in the episode. This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. This is your host Heather Bayer, and as ever I'm super excited to be back with you once again. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you'll know I can be pretty transparent and honest about my experience of being a property manager over 20 years. It wasn't always easy. I didn't always do it right. Anybody actually knows what right means. But this week's conversation did actually make me uncomfortable in many ways, because it really shines a light on the way I operated my business for a number of years. So you're going to hear me be pretty transparent and honest about the mistakes that I made. And I made many. How I fumbled my way through a decade of property management before finally getting into some sort of groove. And I didn't really get there until about 3 years before we actually sold the company. So don't get me wrong, I loved every minute of being CEO of a property management company and growing it to the modest 200 cottages. But now when I look back, I can see how hard I think I made it for myself. And there was also a number of other factors that were involved, not least of which was the location and the business model. And I've talked about the business model many times. And then, without being detrimental to my business partner at all, because I loved working with him, but working with somebody who is the complete opposite of me in terms of working style and business management direction had its challenges, let's say. And we'll get into that. So my guest today is Simon Lehmann. And for anyone who's attended conferences around the world, you'll have seen Simon in action, whether he's moderating panels, he's emceeing entire events, he's having animated discussions in hallways, or he's delivering inspiring presentations. It's hard to come across Simon and not find him actively working and networking in this industry. So Simon ran Interhome, which was one of the largest vacation rental companies in the world at one time, co-founded Vacasa Europe, chaired MadeComfy in Australia, and he now advises more than 50 property management companies across 20 plus countries through his firm AJL. Some people in the industry call him the Godfather, and his knowledge and expertise of the business is renowned. So over the past decade, he's been exploring how property management companies are structured and what makes the most successful ones reach that level. He's identified 5 levels that every property management company moves through, and one transition where more than 80% of them get stuck. I ran my own company right up to that wall. And as I said, I made nearly every mistake he describes. I didn't break through that move. Instead, I sold it, very happily, I should say. So whether you're at 5 properties or 150, you're somewhere on this ladder. And this episode is about what has to change before you can climb it. Let's get into it. A huge welcome to Simon Lehmann from AJL Atelier. Simon has been on the show before, but I'm not sure we've done this one-to-one before, have we, Simon? You've been on as a part of a panel. Have we done this one-to-one?
I think we have done, Heather. You've had over 600 episodes already published, so It's probably a bit hard for you to think about that one in detail, but I have been. I think twice you wanted a summary from the VRMA from me.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
There we go.
And anyway, should have used AI. In fact, I did an episode a couple of weeks ago about the tools I use. And I just come across this new tool called Victor. And I invited Victor into Slack on day one. And Victor went off and did all this stuff I didn't ask for. Spent all my credits I hadn't given it the credits for. But came back and said, hey, you've got 670 odd episodes and I can do a full portfolio of them and do all your transcripts and I can do all this. So I should have gone and asked Victor before I started this.
That's right.
We've talked on so many occasions. I remember one specific occasion, and it was in Amsterdam at a VRMA Europe conference. And I think it's probably about 10 or 12 years ago, I think. And I still had a lot of imposter syndrome at that time. And I was doing a lot of talking about direct bookings. And we had a discussion and you said to me, it's just not going to happen. Direct bookings aren't. You're really flogging a dead horse. It's almost what you said. And I've never forgotten that because it did have a real impact on me. So you've been a part of my progression, both as a property manager and since I've been out of property management for many years.
Quickly.
So thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Heather, for bringing that up. I remember it was yesterday. You know why? Because I was on stage doing a keynote and told everybody in the audience, don't spend your money on Google. It's a waste of money. Because I made some calculations, is that the big three OTAs together they spend 21 billion on Google, so you're never going to win that fight for direct traffic. And I said, spend the money on where it matters, branding in the property, branding in other areas, remarketing, get the people to come back. And that statement still sits around me. And one funny thing, I think it was Matt Londa, he was down in Latin America, heard about it, about that statement that I made. And then he went on LinkedIn and just blasted me out of the water, saying this is total nonsense what you're telling here. And that's probably about 12 years ago. And I still keep my words and we still laugh about this event and you remember it as well. So that's what I said.
Yeah, there was a lot of things about that event I remember. I remember sitting down with Thibaut Masson and him saying he was going to teach me how to use Instagram in an hour. We sat out in the lobby and he really did a great job. And 12 years later, I still use Instagram. But that was a great event. And I'm sorry that VRMA don't do the European conference anymore. But thank you to Damien Sheridan and Scale.
And many others.
And many others, yes. Okay, Simon, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I've said a little bit about you in the introduction, but give us the potted history of your pathway through this industry.
I guess if vacation homes could circulate them in my veins, they would. But I've been around the space 21 years in all different facets of the industry as a CEO of a very large, if not the largest at the time, vacation rental property management company in Europe. I've been on the board of HomeAway when it was public. We sold it to Expedia. I was a co-founder and chairman of Vacasa Europe, which was an interesting stint as well. And I was a chairman of MadeComfy in Australia. We sold that. And I was on the board of Breezeway for many years. And that's gone to private equity. So I've had a lot of different roles in this industry. And I love this industry to bits. And one thing that gets me up every morning is I want to help professionalize short-term rental across the world.
I think you've certainly been doing that. Every time I've seen you on a stage or in a panel or in a podcast or webinars, you are everywhere. And I think people that I know of do have so much respect for what you do. I'm interested today in where you are right at this moment because you've got the podcast. You have the podcast.
That's right.
Have some really great episodes since you started that. But I'm going to pick on one, which was a video podcast you did. And it was a solo, whether it was a podcast or video, I don't know.
But it was a solo episode. Yep.
Yeah, it was called The 5 Levels of STR Companies Explained. And it talked about the 5 key growth stages of a professional property management company, from the founder, operator, with that tiny portfolio, right up to the huge ones, industry leaders with 2,500 plus properties.
Yeah.
And you talk about these 5 levels. And gosh, yeah, I listened to that twice, maybe 3 times. And I thought I'd really have loved to have just got beyond level 2 before I sold my company, but I didn't. There was a line in the video that made me really wince. And I'll just read it verbatim, and then we're going to start talking about it.
Yeah.
You said every level of these 5 levels demands a deliberate break with the structures, the tools, and the decision-making logic that built the previous one. And the operators who recognise that early keep growing, while the rest stall, lose margin, or self-refraction of what the business could have been worth. That's where I got the cringy bit. So why is the thing that built the company so often the very thing that ends up holding us back? So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about these 5 levels. Why did you do this? What got you to list out these levels or create these 5 levels?
So first of all, they just didn't happen in my head, obviously. I just come up with something and say, this is the way it is. Yes, I have my own opinion, but I rather share experience and real data and real experience that I've seen in the marketplace. So first of all, obviously, I've been around the block for quite many years in all different stages of property management companies as they grew from literally 0 to 1,200 exited and other larger ones. So across these 5, let's call them stages of PMCs that I've addressed them. And I tried to think about how do we break that down. And one of the reasons I did that is my own academy. But we'll talk about that maybe later as well. So I wanted to understand, and I've been in it myself, what happens when you hit a ceiling or a wall within your property management business and why, and how you can overcome that. We've seen smaller companies grow, failed. We've seen mid-sized companies, so 0 to 50, my first bracket. The 50 to 200 is the second. And that's the one I serve the most in terms of my advisory and consulting work. So I do one-to-one advisory work for companies between the 50 and the 200 brackets. And it's interesting, I can literally commoditize that. Yes, I had some pushback after this episode that certain people say, hey, I can still make a lot of dough at 50 units and I don't need to grow further. Yeah, that's fine. Most likely in the luxury, ultra-luxury space, it's a little bit different. But I think mainstream STR, we talk 50 to 200 units. And then 200 to go up to 750, and then 750 to 2,500, and then 2,500 above. And there is a real meaning, and we don't have enough time to go into detail on all those, why 750 to 2,500, et cetera, et cetera. And we could even add another bracket, and if time would allow, I can talk about 24,000. And just to open that for a second, I have 5 examples of where 24,000 became massive acquisition. Sykes, Interhome, Vacasa, bought Turnkey, Interhome bought Interchalet, Sykes bought a local operator and others. So the reason was 24,000 is another turning point, but I haven't addressed that because there's only very few of doing that, because how do you build scale? So coming back to the 50 to 200 is what resonates the most. That's where I have most experience. And no matter where I look, so I have customers I consult with in Australia, in Southeast Asia, in Europe, and in the US, and it is the same, universal.
So I want to start right at the beginning, just briefly, level 1. So I remember level 1. I remember moving out to Canada and saying, I'm going to start this company. And I had my 3 properties, my sisters, and the guy down the road who said, you can rent out my property, but I'm not paying you for it. I'll give you a testimonial, which actually did work. We all seem to make the same mistakes at the start. And I talk to people about this all the time. Just take on anything and everything because you just need inventory. Is that what happens? And then
Absolutely.
You want to charge owners and
then I can ask you straight away, Heather, you had 30 different contracts. You had 30 different standards. You had 30 different business models, right?
Oh,
That's normal because you want to please every property owner. One, you do the garden, and the other one only wants from Friday check-ins or on Saturday, only weeks, no short breaks. Every owner has different requirements. You take them all because they're important, right? So up to 50, you create a mess. You create chaos. Everything is in your head. You're the standard. You're the system. And that's the problem. You are the system because you build it that way. And the first time it becomes the big step for that next move. So there's so many things below 50. Your day job, you need to move out of your day job. You're grinding, no holidays. Everything is relying on you. Owners call you Sunday afternoon. You do owner statements at Saturday evening at midnight. All of that up to 50 units. You're the single only person with a few more to do cleaning, maintenance, outsourced or your own. And then you start thinking, what is my best next hire? It's going to be a junior assistant or a VA. Wrong. Big mistake. You need to hire an operations person that takes 50% off your hands, because then you want to start becoming strategic. Everything up to 50 units is operational. From 50 units onwards, everything changes. You need to have more people that are operationally supportive, that can take certain things away, but you're still the standard, you're still the system. You still have all the owner agreements in your head. This owner is this owner is that, this one is very difficult, this one the wife calls all the time and wants this and that. And then it becomes heavy. If you want to go through that, the 50 property wall, then you need to hire operationally. And that's where a lot of these early stages company wobble, because they say, my cash flow is not going to support that. It's not going to happen. But it's an investment and you need to make it.
Yeah. And I remember this. I knew I was going to squirm when you started talking about this, because you are describing exactly what I went through at that time. I remember wearing every single hat. And then the first person we took on was actually a bookkeeper. Because
I could have brought that one up as well. Yep.
And she was bookkeeper and operations manager.
There we go.
Time. And actually, Sandra is still with my old company. We took her on in 2007, so coming up on 20 years now. And I sold 4 years ago and she's still there.
Fantastic.
That was our first hire and we made a good decision. Things dipped downhill a bit after that. I want to talk about you're coming up to 50, because I have a few clients at the moment who are in that 35 to 50 bracket. And one of the things they talk about is owner contracts and still taking on anything, that they're unwilling to say no to properties that just don't fit, because it's easy to talk about, but really hard to do.
That's going to bite you in the back at 1,500 units, because they're going to drag your margin and they're going to destroy your margin. And then once you realize that, when you analyze your portfolio properly in terms of owner lifetime value, margin contribution per property, and there's a lot of metrics you can calculate this, you will realize that probably 20 to 25% of your portfolio is dragging you down and actually reducing your margin and giving you a lower margin. But let's go back to that 50. So yes, you take everything. Of course, you still do. You're still hungry. You want more listings because you believe it's giving you more top line. You're less restrictive in terms of the quality of the property. Yeah, that one will be okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. To push your top line, to have positive contribution. The biggest key is that you build a financial model that basically gives you the certainty that any additional unit is giving you incremental contribution to the bottom line. That is what's most important. And when the next fixed cost is going to increase as you grow, to how many units can you grow without adding more fixed cost? And then after that, how many units do I need to cover the next fixed cost, which is an additional staff or whatever that investment might be? And I think being opportunistic in terms of unit growth, as long as it fits in your portfolio strategy, in terms of quality, the positioning of your brand and everything else, which is important as well. You can't just take everything. That's okay, but you are definitely more open. At 100 units, you have to become extremely restrictive, because what's happening between the 50 and 100, the standards come creeping in. And then at 100, you have 100 standards, 100 different contracts that you're still trying to serve individually. And that from then on is not going to happen. So you need to bring it back. And here comes an interesting, probably a controversial conversation going to be related to my academy, because I'm saying go down to 3 tiers to start with. Look at your portfolio and try to fit them into 3 tiers, a bronze, silver, and gold tier. Even if you have different commissions, different touch points with owner, different agreements, and try to separate them. This is a bronze owner, also in terms of intensity, communication, etc., etc. This is a silver owner, and this is a gold owner. That already helps you to do the first triage, because as of 100 units, you want to come out with a standard contracts for all your properties. And you'll probably lose some because you might have to force some owners to leave because they do not deliver you the contribution margin that you need to run a sustainable business going forward.
So is that a public-facing tiers? So we say
not at
we
all.
Have a
Not at all. That's for you, because you need to tier your homeowners. You need to think about those. And for that, you need good unit economics. You need a good financial base to calculate those. Most property managers today don't even know what the owner lifetime value is. How long do they stay? What's your churn? What's your net churn? That's where you start. But this is not a consumer-facing or an owner-facing tier. This is an internal tier to start thinking about what kind of tiers do I have, with what kind of exceptions have I accepted with the homeowner, and what kind of deals did I make. This guy I've known for long. My standard commission is 20, but I gave him 18. And then you realize all of a sudden you have 100 owners with exceptions. And that is not sustainable. So try to force them into 3 tiers and then build your growth strategy and your portfolio strategy out of that. And I would do that at the latest at 100 units.
So you're doing that. So you've got this group, and I'm thinking back to my experience where we had what we call the legacy properties. The ones that came in at the very beginning, they'd supported us as we started. They were gracious about the mistakes we made.
Of course.
They invited us to dinner. And then the trouble was, as we began to implement standards, and those legacy properties weren't interested in getting up to those standards. We've always been with you. We've always had full occupancy. Why are you getting at us now? Those were difficult conversations. How do you have them?
But you need to have these conversations, because ultimately, first of all, you need to know or have a plan and where you want to head, right? And we haven't even talked about that. Somebody who's growing at 50 units and wanting to grow, you need to have a plan. I think everything up to 50 can be perceived as a lifestyle business, bit of a more extreme hobby, whatever you want to call it. 20 units, you can still have your day job. Then after that, it gets challenging. 50s, then you definitely have not a day job anymore, but you need to think about. And I think that determines the strategy and how you go about as you grow beyond that with your homeowners as well. And I get it. These are the gold customers because they've been here from the start. They supported you. They created good revenue for you. But then your business is evolving. You're building standards. You're building guest expectations are rising. In today's world, we have a lot higher guest expectation because we addressed a lot more former hotel customers who are now coming to our vertical. So that is not going to change. And I started at large property management companies as well. And you have to go back to these owners and say, look, I've known you've been with us for so long, 10 years. It's been great, but our customers are demanding more. Maybe you have reviews to support that as well, and many other things. Plus, my brand, my business, we need to have sort of a common standard and brand proposition to our guests that we want to maintain. And unfortunately, your property doesn't fit into that, right? And then, you know, what people start to do, they build a second-tier brand, shove them down there. And then you add more complexity, you add more marketing, and then that's not going to fly either. Don't start tiering your brand and the property manager below 200 units. That's going to be a killer.
That's what we had thought about. It's what I had thought about doing. We'll have our signature collection. The signature collection, these are the ones that just come in and they're just perfect. And then we have basic.
It's a natural way of thinking about it.
And I think at that time, we're in a unique location situation. It's cottage country, Ontario. You know it. What we had was not in the Jane's Cottages portfolio, but there was a market for it. But I think we had to decide whether that was going to be our market. We were never going to get to Jane's. But on the other hand, there were other companies that were continuing with the very lower end basic ones. But that was a tough decision to make. But I thought at one time, yes, we could do this. We could tier it out under 100. And it didn't work.
Yeah, I can understand that. And in comparison to Jane's, obviously now she had a successful exit. Ozan Nocturne is pushing that up as well. But at the end of the day, in the luxury space, it's slightly different. Because if you enter that bracket right from the beginning, you have different challenges. You have different ways of growing your portfolio. You have clear product sourcing strategies that fit your product or doesn't, and then you just continue. So that's a totally different strategy.
Tell me more about the 50 to 200 and what happens in that time. And tell me, why was it I got to that brink and couldn't get through it?
Look, I have, at the moment, I'm working with 3 customers who are exactly at 177, 180 mark. And literally for all 3 of them, I'm helping them to hire a general manager, full stop. And everything in between. So the person has one of my customers, 2 children, want to spend more time, husband has a business, grew this from scratch to 170 units with a handful of people behind them to run ops, sales and things like that, but still the brain for everything, accounting, owner contracts, owner agreements, go and visit properties. So the classical stuff, not the day-to-day, where's the ironing board? Obviously, you can automate that, but that's in that bracket, you already have processes, right? You have SOPs, but you have no execution matrix. You have SOPs, doesn't help at all, because at the end of the day, you still get the phone call, hey, can I give a discount or can I do this? Because you still control it. So they have SOPs, they have processes, everything, but still doesn't work. Why? Because the owner of the business still controls the decision-making. So there's no decision matrix, that's one. Then they're still holding the key relationship with homeowners. If something goes sour, they call the homeowner because there's no walls in between. They know the phone number, right? Yeah, you can call me if something is going on. So I think that step, it just gradually grows. So you start onboarding negative margin contribution properties. You start to scale and lose focus on potentially process, admin, tech, and everything's, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm making okay money, but never had the time to really drill in. What are my unit economics? What are my KPIs? And because you're doing it, you're grinding. And then you're like, hey, I can't do this any longer. You're either 5 to 10 years in the game, and you're like, this is too much. This is like, when have I had a 2-week holiday with simply no messages, quality of life, I have family, all of that. It's universal. And then you think, I need a GM. Yeah, but it's expensive. It's going to cost me a lot because I haven't taken a lot of money out of the business. I've been using the business to pay for more expenses and optimize my personal spending with the business, but actually I haven't taken a salary. If I need to hire a GM, it's going to cost me 150 grand. I have staff costs, I have incentives. Why do I really want to do that? And I think that the last part that is important, understanding you as a founder and owner, where is your biggest piece of the value contribution? Because you can't be an accountant, a salesperson, and a marketing expert, a numbers revenue management expert all at once. You can't. Each of these owners have different expertise, and they need to understand what they are and then find a complementary GM who takes care of the rest. In most cases that I've seen where it come to the point that I help them hire the GM, write the description, fit that into the organization, and get them to understand where the value of the owner of the business is. And in most cases, it's business development. And they want to continue to do that. And that makes sense because they bring supply in. They bring new products, but let the GM do the contracts. Let the GM do the onboarding. You just out there, you can drink coffee, you know, the real estate agents out there, you're in the community, bring these units in and let the rest happening because that help you to grow your business. And let the GM make it profitable, functionable, and everything else as you grow the business. And then it's the easiest way, ultimately, in 3 or 4 years after a GM, that most of these companies then want to exit with a profitable customer base, with 300 units ending up with going through that wall and then achieve a far higher valuation than do it otherwise. If you sell the business while you're still in it, you will be discounted already $250,000 because of your salary that they need to replace with it.
I've been thinking a lot about tools recently and about the huge stack I ran at CottageLink Rental Management. We had close to 200 cottages. Every guest connected to our Wi-Fi, but we captured none of it. The only contact we ever held was the person who booked. Everyone else in that group, the friends, the family, the ones who might have booked their own stay next year, they walked out of the door as strangers. If I had my time over, if I was doing this over again, StayFi would have been in that stack from day one. It's branded Wi-Fi for your properties. When guests log on, StayFi collects their details automatically, and that's the whole group, not just the booker. From there, it handles a follow-up, post-stay emails, a return offer, a nudge around their travel anniversary, all aimed at bringing those guests back through your own website next time, commission-free. I do believe that's a shift worth making. Stop fighting to win the first booking away from the platforms. That's how they found you. Instead, Focus on winning the second one because you already got them through the door. StayFi helps you keep them. So head to stayfi.com, use the code VRSuccess for 50% off 3 months of StayFi service. That's VRSuccess, and it's in the show notes as well. I think you'll find it really worth your while giving this a go. Yeah, I made a lot of bad decisions along the way, but one of the best ones was hiring that person 3 years before we sold.
There we go.
Yeah, and that changed everything. Now why didn't I do that 10 years ago? So I carried it for 15 years, and then we did have that in mind. We want to exit. So if we want to exit, they've got to replace me. And exactly as you've said, I have to be replaced. And all the functions that I am currently doing, they're going to have to hire somebody to do that, and that's going to impact that price.
So you have to be able to fire yourself from the position that creates the biggest bottleneck to your company. Full stop. Mm-hmm. That's what you have to do. And then the second piece where a lot of people struggle to hire a GM is they don't want to open up their books because they've paid stuff through the expenses, they've used a company car for their own, which is at the end, everybody's tax optimizing their business, right? So they're scared that a GM will then know everything that they're doing. So everybody does that anyway. So it's only normal. And no matter what kind of business you run, and if it's in Australia or in Southeast Asia or US or Europe, it's all the same. Everybody's doing the same. So the GM is a person you need to trust. That's a big change. And you need to let go. And you need to be able to hold yourself back and make sure when you hire a GM that the rule of the game are defined to the comma in terms of how you interact, how often you see each other, what kind of reports do you want, communication, and let them handle it and withdraw yourself to what you can create the best value to your business, and the rest let them operate.
So at what point, you said you've got a couple of clients who are around about 175, 177 properties. Would you think about doing that at a smaller inventory to hire a GM?
Look, yeah, absolutely. I think you could already start thinking at about 100. At the end of the day, where here becomes financial now. What is your net margin contribution at the property level? How much cash do you clear? What is your profitability of the business? Is it ultra luxury? You can already hire a GM at 30, 40 units. I consult the luxury business in the Caribbean. They have 40 units and 80 staff. So think about that. So that's a different game, right? So obviously you hire your GM very early because it's operational heavy with maintenance, pool people, landscapers, gardeners, the whole works. It's a different game. But I think hiring that person, yes, of course, your business needs to sustain it from a cash investment standpoint, and there needs to be a proper growth part behind it. The moment you hire a GM, you can price that into your fixed cost, and then you say, okay, I hire one at 100. It's a pre-investment for me because I can't grow faster if I'm the bottleneck of this business. So I want a GM with experience of growth, managing, operation, tech, and strategic and everything else, and finance. And I'll make that investment because I know if that is the strategy, the addressable market is there. I can grow this business to 200-300 units. Then you make that investment earlier than you do it later.
So you've talked quite a bit about numbers, and numbers never been my forte, just not great numbers. And you've used the word KPIs. Now, I know what a KPI is, but it sounds a bit sort of enterprise to a lot of people. And I know I, like many others, ran on instinct. Hey, this is how much we've got coming in this month. We should be able to spend this. Yes, I did run my business like that for a number of years before I got wise. But if somebody's listening who's getting to that, let's say that tipping point of 45 properties and they're going to tip over into this next level, what numbers should they be watching now?
Yeah, there's obviously many. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing it at arm's length, as you said. And a lot of people do. Still, the vast majority on that size of companies still do that. This is how much cash we get in, how many reservations, how much commission I'm going to make, so we know how much we can afford in terms of salaries and everything else. Then don't forget the low season because you still have costs but no bookings. And that's where people start to fall. They realize, oh, 3 months no bookings and I still have 3 staff on my payroll. I better think about that. But you can go everywhere with KPIs and key performance indicators. In smaller operations, there's only a few you should really think about. but you should do that religiously every day, every week, and look at those to see how they perform, right? And ultimately, I think from all the experience that I've built and I've worked with companies around the world, is the net margin contribution per unit, I think, is going to be the golden number going forward. That means...
Okay, explain that. You are
so
going to
the
explain
net
that.
margin contribution on a unit level, and most of the property managers are not on that level. They know how profitable their entire business is. But when I ask them how profitable a single unit is, most of them don't have that. And I would urge anybody, even if it's a small business and they want to grow, to establish that foundation financially, financial reporting. The earlier you do it, the less complex it will be to implement as your business grows. So basically, you want to understand the profitability on a unit level. So you do cost allocation. So that means this unit has a 20% commission. We know how much revenue it has, occupancy, RevPAR, and everything else. No problem at all. And then we know what our fixed costs are. Our operation, our office, all the fixed costs that we have. And then we know how much it takes to clean. We know how much laundry it takes and everything else. And then we can literally be able, with all the information we have today, you can find out how profitable a single unit is after all the costs are deducted. And that's especially when you get larger. A lot of property managers find out a lot of their properties that they have are actually not bringing a positive contribution to your profitability.
And the great thing is now is that we don't have to apply pen to paper anymore. We've got AI to help us with these things. And I'm just thinking, as you're talking through that, gosh, if I was starting all over again, I'd feed all these numbers in to an AI and say, tell me. At least I'm going to get a rough starting point and maybe a recommendation that says you need to ditch this because you're only renting it for 3 weeks of the summer. And you're marketing it for the entire year for that 3 weeks of the summer. We used to have properties where we'd take on properties where the owners said, I use it all the time, but you can have a week.
Of course, you take it. It's another week. You maybe sell, right? Yeah.
We took it. We sold the week, not even thinking about how much that actually cost us for that week. And it certainly was well in excess of the commission that we made, I'm quite sure.
That's when it becomes more sophisticated. Then we talk about cost allocation. So think about one unit, and that's a perfect example, Heather, that you're bringing up. How much does it cost to onboard, to negotiate the contract? How much time does it take with the sales guy, the BD guy, make the contract, onboard the property, take photos, get it listed, get it marketed? All that is actually cost that is associated to the owner acquisition cost that people just tend to forget. When I ask people how much does it cost for you to onboard a property, they say, not much. I said, it's not true. It's going to cost you a fortune. I'll tell you how and why. So I think you can become very sophisticated. But with today's tools, I could not agree with you more. It's going to be so much easier with all the financial information that you have. The biggest issue you have with the net margin contribution or net profitability per unit is how do you allocate your fixed costs? So let's assume you have a general manager and you have 200 units. How do you allocate the salary of the general manager across these 200 units? That's what it comes down to. For me, keep it simple, divide his salary by 200 and add that to the unit cost. Simple as that.
All right, that is simple. And I've always overcomplicated things and then went, oh, really? When somebody said, you can do this in a much simpler fashion. So I want to make sure we've got enough time to talk about the Academy, but I want to talk next just about tech stack because I did an episode recently that talked about my AI tech stack, which sort of added 4,000, 5,000 a year to my overheads because I subscribe to way too much stuff. And then I was saying, but if I was still a property manager, I'm adding those costs, all that AI stuff on top of my other tech stack because I probably wouldn't have looked at all the features that were already in the stuff I've got and figured out that, I don't need B, the AI bit, because A, the property management software already has this built in. So talk about tech stacks and how operators, and let's look at the 50 to 200. How should they be looking at their tech stack and adding AI into it?
We could fill hours on this topic. I think before it's being held against me, the first thing I want to make as a statement here very clearly, to give you a clear answer, I think today is very challenging because we're right in the middle of it. So that means we don't know yet how this is going to look like at the end of the tunnel. I think we're just in the middle of the tunnel. We're already seeing a light, but we're still far out of not knowing what the weather is going to be when we come out of the tunnel. So we're right in the middle of it. And we're going with a fast train at 300 kilometers an hour, with the difference of being on a steam engine where you have time and you slowly approach that. But we're on a bullet train that's coming towards that light, but the tunnel, we're still in the middle of it. So this is how I view it today, because it's super hard. At the moment, everything still sits on the PMS, right? And obviously PMSs are now trying to expand their value prop with AI agents and everything else themselves to create more stickiness and not losing customers. But all the smaller vertical solutions like guest comms, like home automation and revenue management and data companies, they are all trying to expand their value proposition to make sure they create more stickiness with AI tools so the customers won't leave them. So no surprise that like an AirDNA is now launching a pricing tool. No surprise at all. So that's the consequence, because all of a sudden they have AI, they can build a pricing tool. Whereas Beyond maybe start selling data to create a more stickiness and expand value proposition. Guesty adds agents, obviously, that sitting on their marketplaces at the same time. So I think now you're still building your AI functionalities at large on top of a PMS. The webinar you just did with Alex C., perfect example. He built his 12 agents on top of Streamline. How long is that Streamline going to be there? We don't know yet, right? And as he's automating and building it out, PMS tend to believe, because at the end of the day, what this is all coming towards, and we've started talking about this within the industry at large, is the source of truth. So where is my data source today? And how do I build a RAG, or in easier terms, a data repository, where all my data sits as PMC that helps me to make operational, strategic, tactical decisions for my business? I say the future is you open in the morning your laptop and whoever your bot is called, Simon says, ask your bot, it will tell you how your business is going and what you need to address. You don't even have to prompt it. It will tell you automatically from everything that you have. So for me, the end game is who is going to provide that source of truth and that integration layer, that data layer that allows you to run all your data points in one central place to make all the decisions you need to make to run a successful business.
Nirvana.
I don't think so. It's interesting you said before, if I would have told somebody I'm becoming an AI engineer 6 months ago, they would have told me I should get off my drugs. 6 months later, I am. So last week, I've replaced with my own code, with my own coding capabilities, with my best friend Claude, I replaced 4,500 Swiss francs of SaaS costs with building my own platforms on accounting, on all the things a consultant needs, CRM, things like that. I can build that now myself with good integration. I've been able to do API integrations to my accounting system so I can draw all the information that I need. It's insane. I would have never thought this was ever possible for me at the old age of 56. It's just changed everything. So applying that ability and seeing what Alex Semaniak from JC has done himself, that's identical, right? He did it for a different reason. He had people leaving, he had brain leaving, so he was forced to cover that gap, right? And I think that's how it drives it. Now we need to fight margin compression. We need to create efficiencies. We need to reduce our overhead the way we can and still put the human capital where it matters and put the engine where it creates efficiency.
So with what's happening with AI, and I hear you talk about what you're doing, and I'm thinking, I'm doing the same things, creating dashboards and apps. And I spend way too much time saying, I can't be bothered with that just create a dashboard for me. And it's nice and pretty and easy to use, but was it absolutely necessary for me to do so? Perhaps not, but it's good fun. But let's talk about these people who are going perhaps from 50 properties into that next level and maybe from 200 into the next level. How far is AI and what they can do for themselves going to help them divest themselves of some of these hats they're wearing? Do they have to buy it in from outside, or can they do it as Alex is, as you are, as I am, and build these things themselves?
I think you can. I'm a literate. Technology-wise, I'm a literate. I'm a sales guy. I'm a consultant. I'm a logistics supply chain guy. I've never had anything to do with computers. I was a user all my years. I was just a software user. That's all I did. Never thought about code, never talked about engineering. I did massive projects, but project management, but never really been down in the things. Now with the new tools, it's just so simple now. I can literally, so I've built a tool, my own accounting tool, while I was walking to the supermarket, right? And back. So I want to do physical work, can't sit all day long. So I walked to the supermarket about 3 kilometers and I talked to Claude and told him what I need. And then on the way back, I told him again what I need and go deeper. And then by the time I got home, after doing shopping, it started to build the dashboards with all the integrations that I needed, including an API integration, which I thought was never possible for me to even think about what that means. So the answer is clearly yes. But I'm totally with you, because it can be addictive and you build a lot of stuff that doesn't work and shit in, shit out. So you have to be very careful what you do and don't overdo it. So you need to be very clear what you want to do. Where are your pain points? To the point that you just mentioned, where can I automate? What can I do better? You can have external help to help you build an agent for you very quickly to help you with something that you start playing around with it. And then once you do that and you're curious enough in your own personality, it is rewarding and refreshing to see what you're capable to do very quickly. And that's how I experience it. And now I can't get away from this. And before I go to bed, I just make sure he has enough work during the night. So when I get up, things are looking fancy and I can play around with it again. But being, I think, value drivers, this is the key. And then the second key, and I already alluded to that, and this was interesting. We had this at the VRMA Executive. We had roundtables after the panel I moderated where Alex was on. And we talked about this, and a lot of people were intrigued. And we had some people around the table who said, hey, I've maybe made one prompt on ChatGPT. That's all I ever did. And I think that's like the property management walls, 50 units, 250 units. You need to break through that wall. And then once you do that, it just becomes easier and easier. And you still learn every day. How long it took me to ask Claude to write my prompts? It took me forever. But I don't write prompts anymore. I just write a few words and then I ask Claude to write the prompt for me. Huge difference.
Yes, yeah. And I think, to me, the analogy I use is just riding a bike. It takes a long time to learn, that child learn how to get on that bike and to go in a straight line without falling off. But once they get it, they're off and running. And I was talking to a client about this the other day, that when we started, he was just doing prompts on ChatGPT and now has fully embraced Claude. And every day I'm getting something else back from him. So I've just built this and I've just built this. And I think my job is done.
No, and it's with open source and everything else, it's becoming so much fun. I just had a friend releasing a tool in Europe for property managers where you can put in your zip code of your property and it'll give you analysis on where the customers are coming from across Europe. Based on an enormous amount of data. It's open source, so you can plug that in, put it into your own website. That's what's happening. So it's becoming, we're helping each other, we're shaping, we're sharing. It's different. And the last thing that I think is the key, and coming back to the data repository, you need to know from A to Z on what kind of data you're sitting on. Mm-hmm. And once you understand the wealth of data you have, and it's far more than you can even envisage. Bank statements, phone recording, transcripts, emails for the last 20 years, because that's your domain knowledge. That's not an LLM. An LLM is a large language model. And if you tell it a bad prompt, it will give you a bad output. But this is what I realize as a consultant. My domain knowledge that I have built over 20 years with my experience, my consulting work, and everything that I did for 20 years is enormous. So my data source is what I've built. That's my domain knowledge. And because I centralized my domain knowledge, my output on top of an LLM is so much stronger. We've built a Simon Says bot just to play with it. We've uploaded 51 transcripts of my episode in the podcast. The brain that this has generated with 51 conversations alone is mind-boggling.
Yeah, think about what I've done with 600.
Think about with your 600. You can sit back, Heather. This is crazy.
This is a great segue into your academy, because you've taken your domain knowledge, everything you know about this business, and poured it into this. So tell us about that and what you're launching at Ver.
Yeah, that's only natural to think about. So I was a consultant now for 8 years, and being a consultant is tough. Selling knowledge. People think any 20-year-old post-grad can think he can build a strategy paper on ChatGPT. So the last year and a half has been pretty tough. People think we don't need strategists anymore or consultants to help us. This has come back. The human aspect of business has come back, because you still need to have experience. You need to have been done it. You have been through it. You have life experience. You have leadership experience. You have so much more to offer than just a strategy paper of someone that has no domain knowledge at all. And I realized that I've built 21 years of domain knowledge in STR. So how do I use that the best without having to go to conferences across the world, stay on stages everywhere to build my marketing engine? And therefore, I built an STR Global Unlocked podcast, which is an international podcast. That's my top of funnel. So I've built that knowledge base. I've started to do consulting one-to-one. And now I want to basically make my domain knowledge that I've built over 21 years, make accessible to the large addressable market out there of all the people who don't come to conferences, who don't have the money, who grind at 50 units, they can't afford to go to conferences, and 200 units. And so the academy is now the output of that. So it takes me a year and a half to plan, prepare, build a curriculum based on all my experiences, factual data. And it's 9 modules, 52 episodes that touches all aspects of your business. So obviously starting with operating paradox, we just talked about, and then going all the way through contracts, KPIs, tech stack, and then basically be exit ready at the end of the day. And the underlying title of my academy is From Operator to CEO.
Love that. And you're launching it at...
I'm launching it at Verma in the United States, and then a day later, I launch it in Lyon at Vacation Rental World Summit.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I won't be at either, so I'm going to miss that. But
it's going to be a self-served academy behind the paywall, very simple. And we're making partnership with tech companies who want to resell and use that content for their own customers as well.
Okay, that sounds excellent. I'm sure you'll give me information on that I can include in the show notes, and of course information on how people can contact you, and particularly for the consultancy side as well.
Absolutely. So I'm just in the midst of rebrand. So AJL is actually going to disappear. It's the first time ever I say that publicly, Heather. AJL is going to be the legal name of my company. AJL Consulting is staying the same, but the rebrand is now Simon Lehmann. I've realized that with my domain knowledge and everything that I've built, it's still about my own person and the credibility and the network that I've built over years. It's Simon Lehmann. And that's why it's called Simon Lehmann Academy in the future. And then it's Simon Lehmann STR Global Unlocked. So that's why I rebranded. So we're right in the transition of that. So the new site is not yet live. It's going to be simonlehmann.net. So you can already register today. It's not a live website yet. That's coming for the launch.
Awesome. Simon, thank you for joining me today for the 3rd time or 4th time or how many times it was.
It's been a while though, Heather, but it's been absolutely a pleasure. And thank you so much for having me, Heather. You are the one and only in our industry, and it's always a blast being on your podcast.
Lovely to have you. That was Simon Lehmann, and I want to thank him for being so generous with what he knows. And I'm not sure whether I should thank him for making me squirm a little bit along the way. But what I keep coming back to is that something he said, you have to fire yourself from the position that creates the biggest bottleneck in your business. It took me 15 years to do that. Hiring the right person 3 years before we sold the company changed everything. And my only regret is that we didn't decide to do it a decade earlier. So if you're anywhere near the 50 property wall, or even the 200 one, that's the question that I want you to sit with this week. What are you still holding on to that somebody else should be doing? This is the work that I'm doing with property managers at exactly those tipping points. I was there myself. I know what I got wrong. I know what I could have done differently. I've also spent years talking to hundreds of property managers who did that breakthrough. So I've got a fairly good idea of what it actually takes. It is rarely a quick fix. 6 months of concerted, deliberate effort is a realistic picture, maybe longer. If you want help with that, book a discovery call with me. The link is in the show notes. And everything Simon mentioned, including his new academy and where to find him, is in there too. So this is also the topic of my session at Scalefest in Barcelona in October. I have 25 minutes to get my message across, and you can be assured that I'm going to do it. I want every person in that room to go away knowing who they're going to fire first. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.